I promise to have some explanation about the prompt I ask you to fill in. And the truth is that it's not that easy. It's a great exercise in class when we are face to face, but also online. There's this disconnection, all these things that happen that are difficult to follow. So I actually think that it has been a terrific learning experience, and that the outcomes from the Google Docs are inspiring, are really inspiring. So I have that little bit from me to say to all the class, like, okay, I'm inspired by those answers. Thank you. And that being said, I think that it's fair that we explore as a group the topic a little farther. So let's look at some of the answers that people have been posting. I will not read the very technical terms because I will go into those later. But look at both explanations are acceptable but lack solid proof. What does it mean? What does it mean, solid proof? Excellent, excellent. You are like hitting right on spot. I would say that some people went beyond my expectations, analyzing what were the implications of Michelson-Morley experiment, and also using the word pseudoscience. That is actually very important for us. In which side are we staying? Only science, pseudoscience, only pseudoscience? And other people mention the context that something has. Maybe there's truth, maybe there's knowledge, but it's important for us to know what is the context. And I would say that almost everybody brought to the table what is scientific theory. Are we actually collecting evidence? Are we talking about facts? So this is very important, because then the rules of the game are very clear. And also, it's important that we start to recognize what does it mean to have a solid scientific foundation. Thank you for the term, the most failed experiment. I think I will adopt it. And I think that there's something here very, very interesting of like, okay, recognizing that, knowing that ether doesn't exist is very important for us as a society, but also that maybe Dowsing has an explanation. It maybe is a micro vibration theory, but it is not grounded by science yet, acknowledging that there might be other understanding of the world. And one of the reasons I'm so grateful of this collaboration that we have on the Google Doc is that we are embracing really the diversity of our group. Some people are really analytical and thinking about what does it mean that ether was confirmed not to exist because of collecting evidence. Does it mean that we don't have evidence now to confirm whether dowsing works or not? Absolutely amazing. And I even got to learn some relationship between the words and the language. I think that that's actually like super valuable. Like if we are talking about diversity, that's part of our learning curve, right? To learn from each other, or to learn. So there's this sentence I want to spend a second here. It's also fair to predict in the future humans will be able to have a more scientific and objective evaluation of dowsing. Yeah, like it's a prediction, right? That one day we will have no superstition. And another is that it is the people who paid attention to those tiny errors, the ones that discover something new. And you're not only circumscribing it to scientific experiments, but also in our daily lives. What a treat, that reflection. So let's get into the nasty details of these two things. And the first one I want us to look at is dowsing. All of you already read the Wikipedia article, but I wanted to make the focus on the guy here holding a stick as a branch he picked up from some tree, and then it sounds exactly what we identify as witchcraft. Like, there's no way that somebody is going to find a thing without looking at it, listening to it, or maybe licking it, right? So we have these five senses, that's what all humans have, and there's no perception besides that. That being said, if you go into Dowsing and you look at who is using Dowsing today, it's not some illiterate farmer in a third world country. Water companies in developed countries call for specialized, trained technicians that are these executors of the witchcraft of Dowsing. So when they have to drill a well, they call one of these guys that they will use either rods or a stick. And I think that it's important for us to stay on focus. Like, there's a lot of charlatanry around the world, and we have to be careful of who do we listen to. But we may find that there's some credibility on these practices, and we may find some farmers talking about, like, is it real? We know it works. We'll find articles about why does it work. We'll find also scientists wondering where does this leave us? Is it only some sort of like placebo effect that we believe that it is, but it is real, but we don't have sufficient evidence? And we will also find people saying, we already checked the numbers, and we should be careful when we make assumptions. At least we don't have hard evidence to rule it out. And that is very important for the scientific mindset. We don't have hard science facts that allow us to say that that is wrong. So we cannot say that it is true yet. But we should be at least careful. In the same way that I approach the dowsing and I zoom in the guy that was behind the tree branch, I would like you to imagine that you're in front of that table and there's a source of light over here, and through a series of mirrors and a prism, a piece of glass, we see a pattern on the other side. And this is not a regular table. This is the table that was built 130 years ago, and it's floating on Mercury to avoid any little vibration. And imagine, you don't go around the corner 130 years ago to buy mirrors and special screws. You actually have to build most of these things. So Michelson and Morley are rock stars of science. They stick to the method, and they tried and they tried and tried, completely convinced that this thing existed, and completely convinced after 1887 that they failed, that their fault was that this instrument is not good enough, it's not precise enough. And there's a lot of deal of theory about what is the experiment in itself, but I would like us to position ourselves in the same way that we did with the water companies, calling these highly trained professionals to use a stick to detect a hole, where to dig a hole to find water. That Maxwell is the person that set a system of equations that was explaining both electricity and magnetism, and it was highly theoretical. There was not very clear explanation in the real world. We didn't know if he was right or not. That's the truth. That's the truth. We knew many years later, but it was the year 1873 that he publishes this thing that is a little like well known around the world, still in the scientist world, right? Like in the scientist circles. But a treatise on electricity and magnetism. It's not until the work of Hertz between 1886 and 1889 that there's actually confirmation. So there's somebody that writes an equation the same way that Newton talks about gravity, Maxwell talks about this thing that propagates, but we cannot see it, we cannot smell it, we cannot touch it, we don't really know what it is. There's some ideas that it might be explaining many things, but right now in the world, 1887, when Michelson sets his interferometer and invites Morley to the experiment, and together they carry out this series of tests, nobody knows if the equations are actually real. And if they are, if this jumbo mambo, right, that thing that I'm putting there on the screen, it's actually working, then we should be able to see whether the light does something very special when the ether goes. And why do they think like that? When we hear sound, clap, through the air it propagates. If there's vacuum, there's no sound being propagated. Underwater, you hit with a hammer something, and through the water it propagates. If there is such a thing as a wave that is transmitting the lights, the light wave, then we should be able to build an instrument that it sends this in a special way, right? One way and the other way. And when the ether drifts, we will see a difference. So it gets very technically, very quickly, right? But essentially, we should be seeing something. These two guys, they stick to the method of being very hardcore scientists, but they fail. They die thinking that they failed. It's even the moment that Michelson gets the prize for the interferometer, but he has the Nobel Prize, and still he thinks that ether is the explanation that the radio waves exist. It's not until much later that there's a concept of, oh, the velocity was zero. We were not being able to find, because actually it doesn't exist. We don't need that thing. But if we put it like a big field of knowledge, and we place Dowsing on one side, where we're finding water, we don't really know. Why does it work? Does it work really? Do we have evidence? And we put knowledge, and we use the scientific method, and we see that today we have a very good grasp of radio waves. These are two very extreme opposites of the knowledge field. And I'm using the word knowledge in a more holistic way, but I think that what I was very interested in us having a conversation about is, does scientific research answer all our questions? Is sometimes the scientific method not enough? Does science sometimes answer things in only one way, and it leaves some part that we are ignoring, but actually it's very useful to us? Maybe today we are in the situation with Dowsing that we don't have enough evidence, and we would like to invite science to explain it, and science is not capable yet. So do we have other sources to tap in order to gather knowledge? Is artistic research valid to find answers? So I have a lot of questions, but I wish that we can share them in this class, that we don't become an engineering school where there's this course taught and we have a set of equations to apply, and we never ask why, and we never ask what do we know. So there's a lot for us to chat about.